healthy chunk of them are involved in random silly stuff. They pocket finances, and they eventually get busted for doing random odd shady deals, but nothing ever comes of it. They evade prison. It's just the corruption of Africa, guys. Okay, they evade prison, they don't go for inquiries. If at all they're presidents of the country, they literally latch onto their throne until they get shot dead off their thrones, or there's a massive riot across the entire country forcing them to be impeached. No, like, the rule of law does not properly or adequately apply to them to just get them to step down already. They resist, like, call to step down. They resist them in a way that you would never find in Western culture. Like, if an entire country just feels like a president should be impeached, understand they're gonna be impeached. But in Africa, they sit around making like Robert Mugabe. That's just the way that things are in Africa. In South Africa, it's not as bad as Zimbabwe. There are worse countries than ours, but we generally have got a very African typicality about ourselves. So the poor in this land tend to stay poor, and only a few break past the mold, meaning that the great majority of Africans still have a very ancient mindset about how it is that things operate. The great majority of our women are still very raw African, and I'm about to explain to you what it is that was the raw Africanness that I apparently escaped. You know, this world believes good is evil and evil is good, and so essentially raw Africanness is actually better. And a lot of it's, if there was a barometer of holiness, it would be better, because a huge percentage of Africans remain rural. There is therefore a very huge percentage of African women that flat out take what many women within the lucky category would call nonsense in their stride.
Hello, please like, please comment, please share and share and share and share, and then please subscribe. Thanks.
Hi there, how are you in the name of Christ? It's your girl Crank K. I hope you're well. I've been better. Today's it's not an okay day for me. I'm feeling really under the weather, not to mention the weather's really bad. By under the weather, I don't even mean physically, but spiritually. And it's expected, because it is my second day fasting. Yesterday I didn't feel too horrible, but that's because I had yet to communicate what my fast was about. So last night I came here and I spoke about the prodigal son, etc. And I spoke at length about that topic. And then I just got a barrage of attacks in the night while I was sleeping. Tears were sewn into me as I lay, because that's when the devil attacks me the most. So I wake up in the morning just feeling really bereft. I get agitated, I'm irritable, I am unkind to my cat. Like, I know when demonic attack is happening, and it is presently happening. So when I get this attacked, I'm smarter than that, I'm bigger than that. I know that these are not my own feelings, but irrespective of it not being my own feelings, it's still really bothersome. It's exhausting. My heart is broken on my behalf, and I am beside myself with sadness, because I would much rather not feel this way. But thank God I've been through quite a lot of spiritual war, and I've conquered. So I know that this is not me. I know that this is not how I actually truly feel. So I have to be more mature than my own emotions. I have to be more mature than my heart in this regard, so that I don't speak to my soul and my flesh, but rather speak to the spirit. I have commenced a fast in order to make war with the darkness in our men, and like very predictably and quite typically did I then get this attack or a nightmares, pretty much one after the other, where they continually harass us. Like, I just got these dreams where a myriad of women were all just very bitter, and we were coming in concert together against men. And I woke up annoyed, very annoyed, not by the dream, but by the fact that I have to make war like this on behalf of someone that I just feel as if those should be bigger than that. He should be sitting on his own, standing on his own, because he's the man in this equation. And I'm feeling left, abandoned, abused, disregarded. I'm being slapped with silent treatment, and it's very agitating given the way that I was prior to coming to Christ. My personality basically when I was still in the world. This is something I would never take in my stride. Like, I just would never take it. So just to give you a little bit of a synopsis about who it is that I was prior to coming to the Lord Jesus Christ, that you might gauge how patronizing this whole thing is to me. It's excruciatingly grating. I cannot say it enough, but I have got to be more mature than that. Before I, adored Christ, I was an independent woman. I believe I have made that clear. I have communicated that in quite a lot of my work. I had my own held down. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a synopsis, some expansion of the way that African women are, apart from being gentrified or trained up in the modern ways of women as we dwell in the 21st century. In Africa, I'm from South Africa, okay? My name is Karabo Sizakele Hlongwane. Did I greet you guys in the name of Christ? I don't know how you're doing. It's Cranky, right? So I'm from South Africa. And I am no different from any other African woman in any other African country, especially within the Black community. The only thing that made me different was where it is that I was born. There are sects, if you want to call it that, of African women that frankly do not run with the grain. They don't go with the flow of the typical African woman. And I was born and bred and raised to be one of those. And it is the minority. We fall into the minority. Those of us who are like this. Those of us who pretty much end up like Chimamanda what's that chick, sir? Chimamanda Adichie, that like feminist, very radical woman. There is no one who doesn't know her. She is even quoted in Beyonce's music. Flawless, that song, she's quoted because everybody looks up to her for pretty much cutting against the grain of what is very typical in Africa. So Chimamanda Adichie, right? What she is rare in Africa. You can go and look her up, please, if you wanna. You can Google woman in Beyonce's Flawless or backing track or sound bite voiceover in Beyonce's Flawless song, and she'll pop up. If you can't spell her name, if it's a little bit of a tongue twister for you, she'll just automatically be generated by the search results of Google if you look that up. That Chimamanda woman is the perfect one to use because she is the most prolific, the one that is most known for breaking past these African typicalities. And you will understand what she's about. And if you're still kind of fleshy in the world, you might even like her. But if you're a child of God, if you're a daughter of the living God, you have to conquer it, okay? You have to fight it. And I came to Christ being a little bit of a Chimamanda. So just to explain to you what that is, first of all, I gotta get down into the foundation of into the foundation of what makes for an African woman. But before I do that, I would love to sing my song for the day because it always ties in to the topic at hand that I'm speaking about. And today's song is a gospel song. It is a hymn, an old school beautiful hymn. It is "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, I'll not want." I chose this song because it is what needs be the reminder inside Black women, or women in totality, of course, but right now this is a Black woman struggle. I spoke about that in yesterday's work. You can go and check it out. The most recent work that I did prior to this, you can have a look at that, right? Now, that hymn speaks ubiquitously to us all who know him. All of us who come to Christ can claim this psalm as beneficial to our cause, right? And yet, it appears as if though Black women who come to Christ just do not get what they need. And it just makes the Lord look bad, and it makes it look like he is partial. It makes it look like he is only favoring women of other demographics because of how it is that we just have it in so bad where our men are concerned. It is really a sight for sore eyes and a poignant sorrow for me personally, and I would imagine it is true too of other women in the black community. We really kind of appear to have the short hand of the stick when it comes to men. And despite how glorious, beautiful, or whatever it is that we might come packaged with, they all just treat us ever so predictably. And it is uncomfortable to watch younger women literally go through the modes in the way that we go through the modes, the older ones that have grown up and seen some flames. It's so uncomfortable to watch them go through them, only for them to predictably end up on the other side just like us. It is a taxing discovery, you know, that is unfortunately not even really a discovery, because history is repeating itself. So if only you just went into the textbooks of old, you wouldn't know how predictably your life is going to turn out as a black woman. But when under heaven is that ever going to stop? Why are we not being blessed with men who are really truly loving towards us? Why do they pain us so severely? Why do they disregard us? Why do they hit us with silent treatment? Why do they slap us with gaslighting and reverse psychology? Why do we have to be the ones to grovel so violently at the feet of these men when they never come around? I would understand if it is a feat that we embark on that ultimately pays off, but the generalistic statistics suggest that it never pays off. It's like we are ever visiting our men at their graveyards, you know, like delivering or bringing flowers to a tombstone, trying to ring sense into their heads. That is what it feels like we are doing. We are literally taking flowers to a cemetery and laying them there and talking to stone, to sand, soil, to the mud that this man is buried in, and he will never rise, but there is some strange hope that we will somehow get around to doing it. And so, in so believing that they will rise again, tantamount ourselves to witches that are performing necromancy. It feels that way. It doesn't feel like the generous feat of Jesus, who went on right ahead to raise Lazarus from the dead. It more feels like necromancy to speak to these men than it does feel like the miraculous work of raising a dead person from the dead to life again. It should not be that way. So I chose "The Lord's my shepherd, I'll not want," because it is a psalm that speaks about how it is that when we give our lives to the Lord, all of us who do so ought not want. We shall not want. And yet, why is it that black women are perpetually on a loop wanting? Is it because the Lord does not care for us? Or is it because the men that are supposed to take care of us very simply do not care for the Lord enough to show that indeed the Lord has seen it fit to make sure we do not want, but they're the ones that are rebellious against God, and so therefore we are getting the short hand of the stick. And so the only way as black women to get any love at all appears to be us marrying outside of our race. It should not be that way. We should not have to, make decisions on marriage based on race. We should make them based on love. And because statistically people tend to generally fall in love with people within their own demographic group, those are just basic factual mathematical statistics. It's not anything that has to do with race or gender or any kind of derogatory thing. What is factual is that most of the human race will fall in love or will be attracted romantically to people who are within their own racial groups, because people tend to be attracted to people that look like them. And so because our own racial groups look like us, we very predictably end up married, most of us, to people in our own racial group. So when then you start to enter into a deliberate mindset where you tell yourself that you are no longer trying to be with a black man, you are no longer trying to be with a white man, you are no longer trying to be with an Indian man, because you've seen how typical black, white, or Indian men can be. On that day you're being racist, you're not being very Christian about it, you are forgetting that Christ said that there is no Jew or Gentile, but all I want in Christ, right? So you are flat out being discriminatory in and of yourself, and you're bringing forward some kind of a reverse racism then, where it is that this time around, as opposed to you being the receiver of racism as a black person, you are expanding it. You are being racist against your own people, like black on black violence. If at all you are attracted to a person and it works out and they love the Lord and you love the Lord, then there should be a fostering of a courtship that will bring about marriage without there being any other decider, like whether or not if this person is black or whatever, there should not be anything or discriminatory in any way, be it racial or gender-wise, or anything of that nature that is discouraging your decision from going on ahead. If this person loves the Lord, and you love the Lord, and they are of the opposite sex, you are walking in the favor of Christ, you're walking in the will of God, and there is love there, and you feel pulled towards one another, you should not be discouraged from going on right ahead to marry that person because they are African and you've got a problem with xenophobia, or because they are white and you've got an issue with whatever it is that you might have an issue with concerning white people, or they are from Asia and you have got, again, some kind of xenophobia. No other random fluffy reason ought contribute to why you decide not to marry someone, even if you might be get given problems by your own family because they're racist or they're xenophobic or they're whatever. You as a daughter or a son of God should not be trying to be about that business. Okay, so it is unfortunate then that a lot of black women are finding themselves making a racist decision to avoid black men. I come from there. I have been so exhausted by the insensitivity, the lack of care, the apathy of black men, the way they're so unloving. I have been so exhausted by it that I got to a point where I was like, I will never again give a black man a chance. The moment I put the word black in there, I sinned against God. I basically disregarded that there is no Jew nor Gentile. I became racist, the way that a lot of black people can be racist, who think they can speak smack against white people, and because they're black, they then get away with it. It's a different form of discrimination, and so it ought not exist in the kingdom of heaven. That stuff should be left to world citizens. They're the ones that go and make war on topics like race and gender and blah blah. We understand the fluidity and the equality of people under God. So I gotta check myself and not run with my soulish emotions, my feelings, my fleshy dispositions. I've gotta run with Christ. That's who I need to run with. What would Jesus Christ do is what I ought to strive towards achieving. And if God Almighty in heaven would never ever say, I chose the Asians to be my chosen people because I didn't quite like the Caucasians, then he would not be God on that day. He would be partial. He would be a respecter of persons. He would not be honoring or validating of his own word. So therefore, as Christians, we really need to ignore our own feelings sometimes and think about the basic Bible. What would the Bible do? What would Christ say? What would the Lord do? And if at all the Lord would not do it, we should not try and justify it by any means as okay. The Lord would never ever say, Karabo, I insist you go marry a white man because black men are not quite fitting the purpose. Black men are not quite getting into their joint. So what then on that day do you do when you're frustrated by men in your own racial group? Because you know that they've got issues. You take it to God, you pray about it, and you realize that Christ rescues, he cleanses, he bathes the people. He doesn't just give up on them. But oh my goodness, how long then? Must we all just age? Must another generation just come and go where our men are just very typical? Must we just sit around waiting for nothing at all to come about? And then counsel our daughters the exact same way, only for them to make the same mistakes we made, and this is a cycle. At what point do black men pick their tools up and start to run? At what point? They are breaking us. They're shattering who we are. We want to love them. We want to adore them. We want to be helper suitables. We want to be comfortable to be women with them, and not these strong, overly masculine, testosteronic women that are basically walking in the fulfillment of manhood. We want to be women, but they make us very masculine. They are the ones that make us excruciatingly masculine because they're just not coming to the party. Will I then go and marry a white man? My goodness, maybe I'll end up with a white man, but it should not be because I decided I don't want to be with black men. It should be because I fell in love with a human being, and that's it. And we got married, and it just so happens that we're from different ethnicities. If I ended up married to a white man because I'm tired of black men, what kind of a Christian testimony is that going to be? It's going to suggest that God cares about the Jew and the Gentile, the division or the segregation of those two people. That is not Christ. And so if at all I'm tempted to think that way, I must recognize that that's a devil. It can't be God. No matter how much it works with my feelings and no matter how much I might be upset. So the Lord is my shepherd, I'll not want. I'm sorry, I can be long winding. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Is the psalm I want to sing, because the Lord is my shepherd, be I Jew, Gentile, be I Black, Asian, Indian, be I African, whoever I am. He is my shepherd should I choose to embrace his call on my life. He is my shepherd, and so this is applicable for me, wherever I am at in this world, in whichever tribal group I might belong to. He is my shepherd if I choose him. And I've chosen Christ, and so therefore, I ought not want. I ought not. I ought not. So to want, then, is for whoever it is that is causing me this lack to get his act together, because he is not standing with Jesus as he ought. Herein lies the psalm. I'm going to be reading it from my screen. You guys know that I look at the lyrics there because I don't know them off by heart. Righto. The Lord's my shepherd, I'll not want. He makes me down to lie in pastures green. He leadeth me the quiet waters by. My soul he doth restore again, and me to walk doth make within the paths of righteousness, and for his own name's sake. Sorry for that. Yeah, though I walk in death's dark vale, yet will I fear no ill, for thou art with me, and thy rod and staff me comfort still. My table thou hast furnished in presence of my foes. My head thou dost with oil anoint, and my cup overflows. Goodness and mercy all my life shall surely follow me, and in God's house forevermore my dwelling place shall be. Amen and amen. Hallelujah. That is my portion, and my prayer is that it is yours too, because you know Jesus Christ. Kindly like my work, share, subscribe, and comment, and follow, and do whatever else that you can. It'll really greatly help me to get my life out of this rut. Now, let us go on right ahead to discuss the whole thing with Chimamanda Adichie, and helping you gauge what kind of African woman I was, and how it is that this is so incredibly taxing to me to walk in this fashion. Okay. So Black women in Africa, I am from South Africa in particular, have a very typical way of being, unless they have a different undertone. The grand majority of Africans are still below the poverty line. The grand majority of Africans still rely very largely on the government to help them get ahead. They have got very entry-level, meager jobs, if at all any jobs. They struggle, and a large portion of them also kind of go hungry. They get famished. So most of the African population does not have brick and mortar houses. Most of the African population does not have running water. Most of the African population do not own cars, properly made clothes. They basically don't have the middle income lifestyles that many of you who are able to watch YouTube videos have. Most of Africa is barren and poverty stricken. It is literally as bad as what it is that you see in the news. But every so often there are people that get born in Africa that are, somewhat, that silly word I don't like to use, lucky, because lucky, I don't like it because it's kind of esoteric. It suggests that there is anything other than God who brings fortune, but I shall use it for the sake of illustration. There are many of us that are born lucky, but we are still within the minority. So all of these very impressively gorgeous looking kids on TikTok that you see that come from Africa, they are the lucky ones. They're the lucky ones, right? With all of the glory they bring forward, it is only because they just so happened to be among those few Africans that are urbanized. They are among those few Africans that pretty much can live the same quality of lifestyle as somebody living in the land of the free, the United States. Okay, most Africans are in mud huts with gravel roads and bad infrastructure all over the show. Those of us that have differently are a small number. And I was born apparently lucky. Most Africans are victims of their circumstance in that they are born into poverty, they will stay poor, they will recycle poverty, their kids will be poor. It'll just be bad. However, you know how wealth distribution is a whole problem in this world. So there is absolutely no service by arrived or lucky Africans to the struggling. They just get left there. And so there's sects, there's classist groups, there's silos that keep the barren and poverty stricken barren and poverty stricken. And so the money stays within the middle income. Only kids of other middle income people are proliferated. You will find this as you get older, even as you enter university, even as you enter corporate. You will see that all the kids, all the new employees, the graduate interns in corporates in South Africa all come from families that were lucky. Very rarely, it's not impossible. I mean, if a kid that is born in abject poverty is a star student in school, they might just get a scholarship and escape that. But for the better part of the time, they stay in their bad positions. So when you go to corporate, when you enter corporate as you get older, you will encounter then kids who, like me, you know, have this Lonnie English speaking accent, and they have a little bit of a feisty, spunky attitude when they speak. They know all the artists in the United States that sing. They are basically living in Europe and in North America all at the same time while being in Africa. They are entirely globalized. They are gentrified in the worst way. They know tar roads as opposed to dirt roads, and they know flushing toilets as opposed to going somewhere to a river and doing your business and coming back. They know three-ply toilet paper as opposed to newspaper to wipe yourself after doing your business, and they stay in that lane. So rarely ever will you encounter anyone in corporate as a new entrant, like a graduate in and of yourself, somebody that is from like absolute abject, as in basically like almost homeless or shack living type thing, where there's no running water or electricity in your joint. These individuals, if at all they find themselves there, like I said, are the very few that escape the typicality. They fall on the outliers of the normal distribution, where the grand majority of people within their socioeconomic group kind of stay in that socioeconomic group. They taper to the far extreme of the normal distribution and become what we call the exception to the norm. So they're not absent in that environment. They're just few in number. I knew all of one such individual in my own experiences in corporate. It was a guy that I used to work with, and he came from like abject poverty, shack living, and he strove and he broke past it, and he found himself where he was at as a project manager as well, right? So when you do meet them, I guess one must praise the Lord that, hallelujah, you broke past that. Yes, of course, there are government initiatives to try and like break people in poverty out of poverty, but there's also quite a lot of corruption in our government, where it is that they promise service delivery to these unreached regions, and they campaign like no man's business around these human beings that they might get their votes, because they make up, like I said, the majority of the country. They live like literally the voting majority is these poverty-stricken people. The middle income in this country is not powerful enough to bring a president into power in light of their numbers. The numbers come from these really barren and poverty-stricken people. So you will find around election time in this country that our politicians will literally go all the way into the rural areas. These people that they don't provide water to, these people they don't provide proper housing to, they will go to them and they will promise them the world. And these people will go to the voting polls, and which is yet another thing. The voting stations are so well done, they are so well catered to, and yet they can't bring a basic like water reservoir in that environment with like a distilled pure, like purified water, clean water into that region. And yet around election time they somehow manage to hook up the best voting stations in those areas. It's, you know, quite, it makes it obvious that there's more that can be done, but people are not doing it because of corruption. So these individuals that vote very heavily for our presidents, our ministers, our municipal councillors, and whatnot, these individuals, the great majority of our population here in South Africa, I imagine everywhere else in Africa as well, they making up the voting majority, and nonetheless the most disregarded. They are the most ignored. So after they have fulfilled what it is that they are supposed to do in bringing people into power, the people who they brought into power then forget about them. They forget about them. They do these small little tiny projects there to make it look as if though they're doing their part. They have cameras running when they open up a new school in these rural areas, and then you will never hear about this area ever again. You will also find out that that very school that was open doesn't have enough resources, that the taps stopped running, bringing water, and nobody rocked up to like fix them. A tap is like a faucet. They have disregarded, they don't bring school uniform for the kids anymore. The kids have to walk ridiculous distances in order to get to school, and they're not providing like a bus driver that's gonna like collect them from the villages and take them to school in order to ease them, when governmental funds are literally dedicated towards that mission. But our leaders are busy pocketing money, and so they don't quite get the kids right. So the poverty issues are not being overcome at all, and so that wealth distribution, the disparities, the exorbitant inequalities that you find then in our cultures remain stark. They continue to yawn at everybody, and it is very, very uncomfortable to observe. Okay, now these men and women who are the politicians of our land, and no, I'm not blaming all of them, but a great majority or a healthy chunk of them are involved in random silly stuff. They pocket finances, and they eventually get busted for doing random odd shady deals, but nothing ever comes of it. They evade prison. It's just the corruption of Africa, guys. Okay, they evade prison, they don't go for inquiries. If at all they're presidents of the country, they literally latch onto their thrones until they get shot dead off their thrones, or like there is a massive riot across the entire country forcing them to be impeached. They like the rule of law does not properly or adequately apply to them to just get them to step down already. They resist like calls by the a majority on the ground to step down. They resist them in a way that you would never find in Western culture. Like if an entire country just feels like a president should be impeached, understand they're gonna be impeached. But in Africa, they sit around making like Robert Mugabe, and can't nobody move. And even if Morgan Tsvangirai rocks up and wins the election, Robert Mugabe is like, I'm sorry, no, I thought I was going to win and I didn't, so I guess you're going to have to step aside because I'm not trying to not be president anymore. That's just the way that things are in Africa. In South Africa, it's not as bad as Zimbabwe. There are worse countries than ours, but we generally have got a very African typicality about ourselves. So the poor in this land, in our lands, tend to stay poor, and only a few break past the mold. Meaning that the great majority of Africans still have a very ancient mindset about how it is that things operate. Men, the great majority of our women are still very raw African. And I'm about to explain to you what it is that was the raw Africanness that I apparently escaped. But it appears more so that I was, you know, this world believes good is evil and evil is good, and so essentially raw Africanness is actually better in a lot of its, if there was a barometer of holiness, it would be better than the Africanness that we who were born lucky imagine we have. Now, because a huge percentage of Africans remain rural, there is There is therefore a very huge percentage of African women that flat out take what many women within the lucky category would call nonsense in their stride. Yeah, nonsense. All right. When you are born in the middle class, or when you are born in a household where there's plenty of food, you never suffer for want, you wear school uniform that's not torn when you go to school, running water, brick and mortar structure, you get on a taxi to go to school, or public transportation fetches you, or your mom or your dad drops you off. It is not the tantamount of suffering when you have to come by a taxi or get on a Padco bus in the cold shivering winter like the one that we're in presently to get to work in the morning. That is not the tantamount of a suffering African. A suffering African is chilling in the rural areas with ashy knees, and if they're a school kid, they're walking 3 kilometers, 4, 5, 10 kilometers every day to school. Return trip, make that 20. That is a suffering African, okay? So if you have to wait at the Padco bus every morning, freezing your butt off before it comes there, but you're going to a 9 to 5 that you clock into, and it enables you to buy for yourself lunch every day at that office, or buy goods, or what is this, sandwiches and whatnot, things that you use for lunch in order to eat at work. That is not the tantamount of a suffering African. So I would like to believe that I suffered growing up, because I had to take taxis cold in the morning to go to school, to go to work. I had to wake up like super duper early in order for a Kumbi driver to collect me to go to find myself at school, primary or high school, right? I had to go through the modes. I had to like stand in long snake-like queues at Nort or Breed taxi rank or Gort or whatever in order to get to wherever from a tiny age. Like imagine an 8-year-old child in a snake-like queue with a big fat like school bag like hanging, dangling off their shoulders, grooving therein into her shoulder blades. Yes, I had to do all that. Like imagine all that. It appears inappropriate, but I mean it's the culture of Africa, where kids like you be thinking in Western culture that, my goodness, like how in the world do you let an 8-year-old child, a 7-year-old child use public transport on their own? In Africa, it's a rife practice. It just happens. Like you will find these tiny little toddler looking kids in a bustling taxi rank in the morning and in the afternoon coming back from school. It's just the way that the African system is. That is not the tantamount of unblessed or unlucky. Unlucky is walking 20 Ks. It's walking from Soweto to Mayfair Convent Primary School. That is what is unblessed or unlucky. The great majority of kids are doing that 20-kilometer walk, whereas we got into taxis. So the cushed up life is not the fact that mommy takes you to school every morning and it's a stay-at-home mom with a great dad, and then mommy picks you up later on, but not before watching your netball match. Yes, there are kids that are like that, and they would be the tantamount of lucky squared or lucky cubed. But the rest of us who were like lucky to the 1th degree, we took taxis. All right, we took taxis, or we got on kumbis and we froze our buttocks off, and it was okay. We lived. We made it. We went to schools that got our statistics really quickly to the government, and so therefore by the time we matriculated, we were able to enter into universities. We had when we got to like high school, grade 11 to matric, grade 11 to grade 12, we had accountants from KPMG and PricewaterhouseCoopers, and actuaries from Liberty Life, and all these people from the different fields got doctors from, students that were medical doctors from Wits University, doing their residencies at Baragwanath Hospital and Helen Joseph for their hours and whatnot. We had them come to talk to us about careers, stuff like that. Yeah, those professionals don't get to certain schools, and so therefore encourage children to strive to become accountants, doctors, actuaries, etc. So, and these doctors and whatnot, they would go to schools even in Soweto, Alex, whatnot. If you have ever at all been transported in a moving vehicle to get to school, you are not unlucky. Even if you live in Alex, even if you live in Soweto, like in like the worst sort of kind of like squatter camp joint in Soweto. I am speaking about the level of poverty that hides opportunities from people altogether. So ambition is a very difficult thing to come by because you're expected to just kind of end up like everybody else. That level of squalor and poverty, those of us who grew up Goboma Soweto or even Lonnie, Little Santon Girl, really don't know it. We don't know it from a bar of soap. And so many Africans, many South Africans that come from my ecosystem, my background, my echelon group, those with whom I rubbed shoulders would not even agree with me entirely, or they would not understand or relate with what it is that I'm about to talk about right now, because they were born lucky. They were born lucky. Do you understand? They had access to opportunities. They could dream, they could hope. They knew that if they strove really hard in school, they could get scholarships. If their parents did not pay for their scholarships, they knew that with their matric certificates, they could go work at a call center and then pay for their own online courses, correspondency, or take themselves back to Wits Plus for part-time courses. They knew that they could do that. I'm speaking about kids here that sometimes could not even write matric because they didn't have an ID book. Their mothers of which could not help them get anything registered because in and of themselves they don't have an ID book. They have to rely on cleaning people's houses. They have to rely on government stipends. They have to rely, like literally no shot for you. You could be a 24-year-old, you're young, really there's a future that you're facing, but there's none. Why? Because of where you come from. Which is why a lot of the people from these regions also flood to Johannesburg to try and see if they can't find the opportunities that us lucky kids had. But we lock them out. We lock them out. We don't let them come in. We don't let the 24-year-old kid from the exorbitantly poverty-stricken portion of South Africa break past even the job interview that hires matriculants in order to become call center agents. We keep other Africans out in the cold, because we are almost like in a Hunger Games arena for these opportunities, and anyone at all that wasn't born with an automatic starting advantage, nobody's going to be lifting them up, nobody's going to help them. It doesn't matter how intelligent they are. It's the sadness of what's going on out here in these streets. Everybody's just like famished, and so everybody is a savage within the middle class. They become savages because they are literally scrummaging for scraps of what is available to us all. So the children then, the women, the girls, the young girls becoming women that are in the exorbitantly poverty-stricken portions of South Africa, which makes up the grand majority of South Africa, something we have blinded ourselves to seeing. They have a certain training way about being women. They get taught that a woman must just take stuff lying down. They still operate very much in old school ways of thinking across the world, where women relied on men for their daily bread, for their sustenance, for their future. If you get married, literally wipe sweat of your brow type thing, like wipe your forehead, because relief comes over you. You hope when your baby comes out of your womb that she's pretty, so that she will get married, because that's all that is her future. So little girls that are within the grander majority of Africa, within the unlucky space, are trained from the moment they can comprehend ABC to take anything that a man throws at them. Literally anything. Anything. That is why HIV is so rife in Africa. Because the most ridiculous men go on and sleep over and over and over again with women that they bounce back to after going out there being a fool, acting an animal. And then the wife at home that's only ever been with this one man will then contract a virus. They also have limited access to medicine, right? To healthcare. And so they die from full-blown AIDS very quickly. Very quickly. There's like a whole black market in facets or sections or segments of Africa for antiretroviral meds, and in this black market they sell them at hyperinflated prices alongside adding bulking agents to them in order to spread the supply. So basically it's not real ARVs, but they still spend way more than what it is that a person buying ARVs, accessing them within the middle class would pay. So they pay more for medicines than people who can afford medicines because of corruption. And even then, it's not the real deal because they've like juiced them with bulking agents. Yeah, you get my point. Like adding flour into a pill just to make it, you know, like take you further type thing, so you can have more supply on hand. That is what is going on there. So there's lots of disease, lots of death, very quick death. And the women, they like literally imagine having a beauty queen, a stellar beauty queen that was a virgin at marriage, dying from not only full-blown AIDS, but at that end row of the road there is untreated syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, like all these myriads of diseases given her, no, not by multiple men. She's only ever slept with one, but one guy that literally kept on bringing back all these diseases over and over and over again, not getting them treated, and the woman couldn't even find help, and so they died very fast. That's the African woman that is in an unlucky space. And in her dying, but she tends to be rather at his deathbed actually, because he tends to go out first. She's still by his side. Black women are trained, they are taught to, in our culture it's called khotlela, or that's in Tswana, or in Zulu it's ukbekezela indoda. You will get told that indoda iyabekezelwa or monna wa khotlelwa. In Tswana it's monna wa khotlelwa. In Zulu indoda iyabekezelwa. In English a man is endured. Now that whole thing with indoda iyabekezelwa, that whole thing with a man is endured, no matter what they do, you just take it in your stride. Our grandparents tried. They did. Like my grandmother tried to like proliferate that, try to pontificate it over us as kids. My grandmother tried to pretty much teach me and my sisters, my cousins and whatnot, females, my mom too, I guess, you know, her own kids, that you don't fight a man, you just take it in your stride, otherwise you'll divorce. But it's because my grandmother had an ancient mindset. She had an ancient mindset. And so my mom's generation were I think maybe like, let me not say the first, but maybe almost the first. Maybe the generation before her also came on board first, right? Was like, okay, mom, you say that I must khotlela my man. You say I must bekezela my man. You say I must just sit my man out. Well, I mean, I don't have to. I don't have to, because I've got a job now and I can live in a brick and mortar structure myself. I can feed my children. If I get divorced from this man, even if he doesn't pay child maintenance, my kids will live. They won't be on the street. I'll be okay. I might be a little bit bitter because I got divorced, but I will be able to eat, and my kids will be able to have transportation to go to and from school. And when they get to school, they'll be able to buy some chips and a chocolate. I don't need to sit that disgusting fool out. Hey, are you feeling reached by my content on YouTube? If so, you might be interested in checking out my tweets as well, alongside reading my content on my WordPress account, alongside checking out my shorts on TikTok. They're all in the description box below. Please enjoy the next coming content. Bye. So then, when women progress past those poverty-stricken conditions, those rural type conditions, speak English with a twang, hello there, sounding like Coconut Kelly, I don't want to inherit your poor, I might just catch your poor, please, I don't want to catch your poor. Those of us who went to these schools that made us speak like our noses are closed like that, gentrified like no man's business. We are among the higher echelon of the lucky, but it is not everybody that speaks like Coconut Kelly. Hey, I don't want to catch your poor. It is not everybody that speaks like Coconut Kelly, like Karabo, that is still lucky. You can still come with a very heavy accent. How are you doing today? Yes, I was wondering if you could perhaps pass me that PowerPoint presentation and then the two of us can discuss it over lunch. Even they have escaped that mold. So even the women that did not necessarily go to Model C schools, that would be schools where kids of all different ethnicities mix, as opposed to just black only schools in Soweto or Alex or what. So whether you speak English like this, please, what are you doing? Say no, I'm gonna go tell you probably, hey, don't come to me now. I will show you. He is still with a bobblehead, okay? It is about literal poverty, like rural areas, ashy knees, walking to school with torn shoes, 3, 4, 5 kilometers, a return trip every day. Those women coming from there, those girls, they are the majority of South Africans, and they still think like my grandmother and my grandmother's grandmother and my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother, and I could go on. They are still like indoda iyabekezelwa, a man is endured. And so African men are a little bit kind of like crazy, and not only are African men kind of crazy a little bit, a lot of African women still have a low-key kind of craziness too, because the majority of them are in that just green.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and finally subscribe. Bye, guys.